Voices of the Future. I mean, it's it's a remarkable group here, we going to learn a little bit about, not just the voices of the youth, but also some of the differences, not just between the young generation and the old generation about perceptions and thinking and goals and ambitions, but also about the differences that occur between the different countries, because this is an initiative that is within the G7, G20. And without further ado, the leader, Chiba-san.
Thank you very much. My name is Soichiro Chiba, and I am currently chairing the Y7 and the Y20 community in Japan. For those of you who are not familiar of the Y7, the Y20, it is a official kind of like a think tank for age under 40 professionals. So our definition of youth is from high school students all the way up to 39. So we have a variety of generations in our community. So for those of you who are interested in joining the Y7 and the Y20, please feel free to contact us after this presentation, although you may no longer be a youth anymore. But I think what's important is the heart. So what is special about the Y7, the Y20 is that it is, we get to have the opportunity of meeting the head of state every year, about 30 to 1 hour of each country where the G7 and the G20 is held. It started in 2013 with President Putin and Merkel, Prime Minister Abe, and Modi, and so forth. So we do have a unique opportunity of presenting our opinions to the G7 and the G20 leaders in the global stage every year, annually. What we also focus is, we try to focus on doing two things. The first thing is we make our policy recommendation based on research, both quantitative and qualitative research. So we try to increase our professionalism in it so that we have a global advisory board from notable universities around the world. We also conduct surveys to ensure that we're not really representing the very few young kind of, got the prestige of joining the community, but also we try to ensure that we represent the youth of Japan. The second thing is actually, the representation that I just mentioned. So we try to increase professionalism and also trying to represent the young voices. So that's it. So here, the four of us have been involved in the community for a couple of time, and we have certain profession in each of the topics that we are going to talk about. There's 4 topics that Jesper mentioned that the young people are very interested in. The first one is economy, which I will kind of explain very shortly. The second one is happiness. Like, what is the definition of happiness? It has been changed from generation to generation, and Julie will explain something about mental health and happiness. The third one is Yuki. He will explain about peace and security. It's a very sensitive agenda, including what's happening in Ukraine and Gaza. And obviously, there's a lot of disparity among the opinions of the youth. And lastly, environment. There's this whole green movement around the world, but there's also a contradicting movement to the green. And there's also contradicting voices among the Japanese youth and also the global youth. So I hope this can be a very interesting discussion for you to get like an idea of what the Japanese young people are currently thinking of. And we will love to have your inputs as well. So starting from economy. In the economy session, first of all, we did a research of why do we need to revive the Japanese economy? Some people think that it's okay not to revive the Japanese economy because we are a stable nation. We don't need growth as long as we can maintain our living standards. But mostly the 60 to 70% of the Japanese people are actually willing to grow. So that was the statistics. I'll give you the statistics right here. And so our policy recommendation was, and we went into more research of how do you actually grow the economy. And we did a regression analysis, um, getting a hint from many scholars, including Jesper, that the strongest correlation between GDP growth was the number of entrepreneurs. It wasn't population. But many of the Japanese government people think that increasing population is the determined factor of growing the economy. But it's not. It is the number of entrepreneurs in one country. And so the current Prime Minister Kishida is focusing on trying to revive the entrepreneurship scene in Japan. But our policy recommendation was there are a lot of capital in Japan right now because of a lot of initiatives and subsidiaries that Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister Abe has implemented. But the critical point here is that the status of entrepreneurs are very low in Japan compared to, let's say, the United States. For example, if you ask let's say, American student, you ask which do you respect? The first person is, for example, Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg. And if you compare it with the CEO of General Electronics, which do you respect? If you ask a question, which do you respect? Probably more than 95% of the people will choose Jeff Bezos because it's huge. But if you ask a Japanese youth, do you respect Rakuten Mikitani, which is like the equivalent of Amazon in Japan, which has been very successful, or the CEO of Mitsubishi Corporation? Surprisingly, more than 80% of the Japanese people said that they respect the CEO of Mitsubishi Corporation. Now, from this, you can see that the status of entrepreneurship is very low in Japan. And this stems into a lot of unique things that the Japanese culture has, the corporate culture has, which is seniority-based wage system and lifetime employment, which was sources of economic growth decades ago. But it's turned into like some kind of obstacle of economic growth today. But the point is, it still acts like a brand because once you're in a corporation, you're set for a lifetime. You get trained into a corporation, and it has a very high social value. So our recommendation to Prime Minister Kishida was that, okay, you have the fund, you have the capital right here. What you need to do is to increase the status of entrepreneurs. And how do you do that? The government should take initiative to advertise to the public that the strongest correlation between GDP growth is the number of entrepreneurs. And therefore, we need entrepreneurs in Japan, and the education and the corporate culture should transform so that the Japanese young people can join into the venture world. So that's our recommendation, and that's how there's a disparity between the Japanese and the global youth in terms of the perception of entrepreneurship. Okay, so that's entrepreneurship, and I would like to pass the mic to Julie, who's going to explain about health and happiness.
Okay, thank you, Chiba-san. And hello, everybody. I'm Julie, and I was a delegate to Y7 2022 in Germany, and specifying in health and solidarity. And I also participated in Y20, which was held last year in India. All my topics are going to come back, but then just a quick introduction of myself is I love sports. I'm a really sports lover, and I graduated from university majoring in environmental sciences. And talking about where I come from, when people talk about environment, I believe that, a lot of people focus on, the climate change or the animals or the water and the ecosystem and stuff. But then what we usually forget, or like people tend to forget, is we human beings are also a very important part of the environment. And people are composed of physical health and mental health, which includes happiness. So the interesting gap between the older generation and the relatively younger generation, I believe, is the definition of happiness. The older generation, maybe I don't know, many of you may be able to relate, but then older generation, I believe, used to aim for the highest. And not that the younger generation or the relatively younger generation doesn't, but then what does highest mean? It used to mean money, is what I believe. But then the youth, what we focus more on is mental health and a work-life balance. So in a survey which the Japanese television did, they usually do every year, but then so last year what the Japanese television did, they took a street interview to the youth, newly grads and the university people who are graduating. And 60% of the targets who answered took work-life balance over money. Yeah, so that's what's interesting. And what's more interesting from what I got in the negotiations is that Japanese youth, this tendency is common worldwide among youth. They tend to take work-life balance over money. But then what does work-life balance to the Japanese youth mean is more focusing on time for themselves or time with their friends or like time for their hobbies, etc. But then youth in the Western world, they tend to focus more on time with their family, which is one of the interesting points. Hence, afterwards, what we as youth proposed is focusing on ESHG proposal as an inclusive framework to be focused by the companies. At this moment, there is a framework where the companies should focus on ESG, which is environment, social, and governance. But then we proposed including health in as an important topic in one of these frameworks, because health is an important part of the not only the employees, but then of the human beings in general, which make up an important part of the company as well as the environment. Yeah, and there were also proposals about mental health education, but then happy to take any questions if there is any further interest regarding it.
Okay, hello. Good afternoon. My name is Yuki Tokunaga. I'm currently co-president of Y7 and Y20, G7 and G20 Youth Japan, which organizes Y7 and Y20. And today I'm going to talk about the peace and security topic because of two reasons. First, myself, my grandpa experienced the atomic bomb in Nagasaki in 1945. And I'm actually the third generation of the hibakusha, the atomic bomb survivor. And the second reason is that I was living in Russia and also Israel, where so many things are going right now. So I feel quite special feeling about ongoing situations. And in 2023, we had a Y7 summit in Japan, Hiroshima and Tokyo. And I was in charge of the discussion. So I want to explain about that. So basically there were two focal points in the peace and security discussion. The first thing is the nuclear disarmament, abolition of nuclear weapons. And second is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And as for the first one, the nuclear abolition, is that there was obviously a difference in understanding between countries which have the nuclear weapons and also between the countries which do not have the weapons, these weapons. But there was a fierce discussion, especially in the second topic, which was Russian invasion of Ukraine. So basically, Japan tried to be, I'm not sure whether this is a correct word or not, but neutral in terms of because for example, Japan has the northern territories issues with Russia, and also in terms of the economic stabilities, we are depending on the Russian natural gases. So Japan tried to explain these factors to other G7 member states, but other Y7, let's say, delegates were quite disagreeing with the Japanese position. Firstly, they want to set who is right, who is wrong, black and white. And in the end, we had a serious discussion until 4 a.m. We had a discussion in the hotel lobby, but hotel says it's already over. So we moved to the karaoke box next to the hotel and stayed awake until 4 a.m. Finally, made a communique, which is the agreement, consensus agreement. And we, for a Japanese delegate, there were three things that we could insert in the communique. The first is to emphasize the importance of the youth exchange in conflict resolution. And the second is to preserve the collective memory of the atomic bomb survivors, hibakusha. And third one is to set a step-by-step time frame of the nuclear abolitions of not only G7 countries, but also non-G7 countries as well. So, yes, thank you very much. It was the end.
Thank you so much, Jesper-san and Chiba-san. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sayo. I've been working with G7, G20 Youth Japan a bit more than 5 years. And so I'm currently working at METI, Ministry of Economic Trade and Industry, as an internship as well. So here I am to talk about what has been the discussions going on in the environmental track at the Y7 and Y20 in 2023. So as both Y7 and Y20, there was a notable difference among the attitude of individual countries towards the use of fossil fuels, phasing out the fossil fuels. So the Western countries are more focused on the greener side, and they were, but on the other hand, including Japan, other countries are a bit more about the cautious of the use of fossil fuels, kind of not too much of on the same page with European countries. So in other words, in terms of the energy trilemma, so security and so affordability was the kind of the key for the other countries compared to the European countries. So with the perspective of European countries heading towards the renewable energy, on the other hand, including Japan, a bit more cautious, as I said before. So based on my research and also based on the survey that we conducted, Japanese has a very unique geographical uniqueness compared to European countries. We are the island countries, and also in the context of the percentage of imports that the natural resources we have, it's very quite high compared to other countries. So when you consider those kind of factors, as a Japanese youth, I decided to not too much on the same page with the European countries, but instead of a bit more focusing on the energy security and also affordability. So that was a kind of the key discussion we had at the Y7 Y20. As the same with peace and peace track, we had very intense conversation both Y7 Y20 summit. At Y20 summit, there was more than 24 hours discussion, negotiation happened related to this topic. So at the end of communique, we decided to go with a couple words using not stop or eliminate the fossil fuels, but more on the phasing out. And also one of the keywords that came up at the communique was using the term of barriers pathways, considering the fact that each country has a unique situations, as I said, in Japan as well. And towards the carbon neutrality in 2050, I believe that each country has got a different way and different situations towards. So that was kind of the key sentence that we try to put in, kind of against Western countries where they were trying to stop the fossil fuels like right away. So yeah, that's the environmental track brief explanation. And yes, that's it from my side first.
Great, fantastic. So thank you so much for this, brief sort of little feedback here. Now, on the economy, entrepreneurship, mental health and work-life balance, we've got youth exchange and preservation of the history of war, and various pathways to carbon neutrality. Let me ask you the obvious question. So what did Mr. Kishida say when you made your proposals? What was the big pushback?
In terms of entrepreneurship, he mentioned that is very important, and that he has not heard from many of his advisors. The focus was previously the focus of the government was how to build a venture capital ecosystem, how to increase capital so that you can invest in a company. But very few focus was on the status of entrepreneurship itself. So he mentioned, and we're still in discussion about this, but he mentioned that, changing the corporate culture is the key, so that he would have a task force of trying to change the Japanese corporate culture. He originally had that, but he wants to connect that with the entrepreneurship. So the seniority-based wage system and lifetime employment, so the task was to make that a little bit more flexible to increase liquidity in the market. But instead of just trying to increase liquidity, he mentioned that increasing liquidity's ultimate objective, should be to increase entrepreneurship in the society. And he's going to, and we're still in discussion about that. Yeah.
Well, he did, mention the importance of mental health, and he does acknowledge it. But then one thing he mentioned was something similar to what Chiba-san said, but then on the point of ESHG, changing the corporate culture is very important. Also, what we proposed as youth was, starting the mental health education early. One of the proposals. When we took a survey to the Japanese youth, 75% of the youth did, recognize the importance of mental youth, but then they don't know what mental health actually means. Yeah, so mental health education is the importance, and when we proposed it to the Prime Minister, he did agree on it, and we're still in discussion.
Just to add on, so Prime Minister Kishida is started a task force with Mr. Hayashi, the Kanbo Chokan, of something similar to ESHG, which is trying to invent a new GDP metrics. It's called gross domestic impact, and by including health component in it. And that is actually, we contributed quite a lot in terms of the input. So that's one output from the health side.
At the time, the time of the presentation, I was not there, but so I heard from the delegate in this track. He said that when he mentioned about, our delegate mentioned about the future orientation. So the relationship based on the future oriented. So it's not the 3 years, 4, 5 years period, but more than 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, because we are still youth. So in 30 years, still we are going to be related with this topic. So Mr. Prime Minister Kishida seems to get very interested in this phrase, future orientation. And also, as I mentioned, the importance of the youth exchange in the conflict resolution. Our delegate said Prime Minister nodded when our delegates commented about this phrase. So this is what I heard.
As he said before, I was delegate for the Y20 2023 in India, and I was a committee member for Y7. So since I was a committee member, I was not at the present room with Kishida-san, but so maybe Chiba-san was there if you can.
So the policy recommendation from us about environment was, instead of focusing on environmental value exclusively, why don't we focus on 3 E's, which is environment, economy, and energy security. And this 3 E's should be the main policies of Japan's energy. We communicated that with Prime Minister Kishida and also with Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. And that became the main speech of Minister Nishimura, that we should focus on the 3 E's. That was last year. So I think that was very well received. But also but also to emphasize the importance of achieving carbon neutrality. So that was the feedback from Prime Minister Kishida when we and in actual outcomes in terms of environment.
It's very interesting, and I hope you get a little bit of a flavor here. The Japanese government, the Prime Minister's office, is actually very, very good at having sensors and antenna out into all different parts of society. And the reality of actually consistently, year in, year out, right, meeting with the youth delegation, discussing some of the topics, and you can actually show that it is being reflected in some of the policy initiatives that the government is actually taking. So sometimes you get this view that, Japan is sort of very opaque and it's some sort of secret elite that decides things. Actually, when you look under the hood, you see that the tentacles, right, into the various parts of society, including the youth, right, is actually a very, very strong one. Now, let me open up for question. You had a question there.
Thank you very much. Name is Jing from Asia Society. As a member of the first G7 G20 coordination mechanism last March, both Shepard attended. I commend you for this wonderful effort of the Y20, Y7. It's wonderful to bring the youth voice into this mechanism. There's a missing element of imagining the future of the global order from the younger generation. So I want to hear from you, how do you imagine a world order by 2050?
If you look at the global order, I think you also need to think about technological revolution as well. And if you look at 2050, not even 2050, but maybe if you look at 2030, I think there's 3 trends coming out. The first trend is artificial intelligence. There has been a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence in our community as well as the globe. But the rapid development of artificial intelligence is outstanding, so that it will completely change our global order, how we work, and hence what the definition of power. You also have blockchain coming out. So if blockchain becomes the mainstream currency of the world, if it becomes the mainstream currency of the world, that relatively means that the US dollar's power would decline, right? So you need to think about those kind of things. So the first one is artificial intelligence and blockchain. The second thing is nuclear fusion. So infinity amount of energy might come out. If you look at the last year's DOE's publication, that they have been successful in terms of getting energy from the nuclear reaction, more than the input. The output was more than the input. So I think the era that the infinitive energy that we can get access to infinitive energy would arrive at least in 2050. Some people say it's 2030, but who knows? But if you look at 2050, I think that would arrive. The third point is health. And there is some research, biological research, that we can extend our lifespan tremendously. Not even 100 or 150 years, but 200 years and 300 years without actually biologically aging. There's a very interesting research by a Harvard University professor called Sinclair. He invented this so-called some kind of a medicine that proved to be very effective in terms of reversing aging. There's also a research in Kyoto University, Yamanaka-san, of IPS. So I think the era of us living very long, very, very long, 200, 300 years, would arrive within 2050. So 3 things: artificial intelligence, infinite amount of energy, and extreme longevity would arrive in 2050. And if you look at the global order, if you ask you what kind of global order is, in that context, I think the countries that created the right philosophy, right social structure design that can match these three mega trends would be respected and would have increased its status if you look at this time span of 2050. Yeah, so that's it.
So it's fantastic. There you've got a techno-optimist, right? Basically telling you your old Henry Kissinger way of looking at world power is going to be outdated, that there is going to be all these leapfrogs that are going to start to happen. Now, let me put you guys on the spot. Do you agree with this sort of, bold vision that, everything is just coming within reach? In terms of, the artificial intelligence, is artificial intelligence going to improve, or what is the opposite of improvement? I forget. As an optimist, I don't know. Or anyway, is it going to be good or bad for our mental health, which is something that you outlined? Are these trends going to be good or bad, for security and peace? Are they going to be good or bad for the environment? Please, you jump to it.
Okay, so it's just an imagination, as I also mentioned in the question. But then, so like in terms of, what Chiba-san said, I believe there are two aspects related to mental health, which is artificial intelligence and health. So one is artificial intelligence. I believe it's going to increase, and by the increase of artificial intelligence, to be honest, we don't really know what's going to be true and what's not, and that's a big topic of discussion at the moment as well. And not knowing what is true and not knowing what is fake. So, I believe everything goes back to education, but then going back to education and knowing, increasing our ability and ability to being able to distinguish what is fake and what fake does actually, exist. That's one point of discussion we need to focus on. And I believe that in terms of the restrictions, there needs to be something done by, it's already been going on, but then there needs to be restrictions made by the government, made by the platforms, made by the artificial intelligence providers on the correct usage of artificial intelligence. That's one point. And the other point of increased increased life is, if I think it all goes back to the definition of happiness. Does living long actually mean happiness for people? That's a point of discussion as well, because living long and it doesn't really, mean that, people are happy. So defining mental health, defining happiness is one of the points that's going to, have to be discussed by us youth, as well as, involving the, respective stakeholders.
On that, I was asked, a couple of months ago by the Prime Minister's office, well, how can we protect against artificial intelligence? And I said, well, invest, 100 trillion yen in education, because at the end of the day, the human. What you worry about is, technology will progress and all sorts of variations will happen, but what you really worry about is not AI, but HS. Human stupidity.
I have experience in living in Russia and also Israel, but there's, I think, one common thing between these two countries about ongoing situations. They are chasing something priceless. So, for example, especially Russia, for example, after the collapse of Soviet Union, Russia became a capitalist country, and for the sake of the, common interest, there is a economic development, future economic development. Russia, tried to make a new kind of the relationship with the Western countries, but in the end, Russia is now, killing a lot of people in Ukraine by sacrificing economic interest, economic development, cooperation with other countries. Israel, same. Israel is now, have a kind of the battle in Gaza. So many countries are against this, but still they do. Why? I'm really, really curious. But we don't know why, but they know why. There are things that they have to protect even by sacrificing the economic interest. And why I say is that I'm currently preparing to build a startup. This is related with traditional culture. So, of course, the traditional culture is really big, very difficult. But what I want to do is that to make a common language in addition to the economic mutual benefit. So right now, Russia has its own logic. Maybe Japan say, okay, so let's develop a new kind of, I don't know, gas field in the north. This is very profitable for both of us. But if Russia makes a war, it's, for us, it's completely difficult to understand. But Russia still has its own, they do whatever they want. So for that, we have to understand, okay, so Russia has its own logic. Of course, we do not affirm that, action, but at the same time, we also have to find a new kinds of common language in order to continue the discussion. And I think this is culture, communication, for example. So yeah, I'm not sure about I correctly commented about the global order, but I think in 2030, 2050, we have to understand something priceless, not only about the economic development.
I understand your question was, is artificial intelligence development, how is it going to affect the environment? And I think I'm pretty optimistic as well. So I think the development of artificial intelligence is going to affect in a lot of ways, in many ways, to the environmental issues, current environmental issues. As I stated in the first speaking, brief comments about the Y7, Y20, how the discussion was going, I talked about the importance of energy security. So when I talk about energy security, which means looking at the demand and also supplies, like how it's going to change, over 20 or 30 years. That's very important to look at it. And I think starting off is IEA, many institutions have kind of already researched on it and also shared it to the society how the demand, especially and also the supply is going to change. And I feel like not everything is saying the same, not every map says the same stuff. And I feel like it's very connected to the development of artificial intelligence and as well as the technologies as well. So I think in that kind of a context, the demand and the supply will be changing according to the situations, development of the artificial intelligence as well as technology. And that will, I think that's kind of the effect it has towards that kind of context is going to change, also meaning that going to kind of affect to the renewable energy and also hydrogen technology, ammonia technology, that kind of context as well. So yes, I am very optimistic about the development of any kind of artificial intelligence. And then I feel like reaching out to the carbon neutrality in 2050, it will have a huge effect and I'm hoping it will have a huge effect in a good way as well. Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question that requires very little thinking. One of the challenges of Japan is demographics. You have a declining population. So all eyes are on your generation. How do you feel about that?
I'll answer the question. So I think the declining population itself, well, it is a problem, but it's not that a big problem. I think even in the context of declining population, if you increase the number of entrepreneurs or the productivity of a population, then you can achieve economic growth. If you look at the example of Israel, Israel has a very high GDP per capita growth in terms of growth. But if you look at the population growth, it's not that much. If you compare with Africa, Africa has a huge population growth. But if you look at the GDP growth, it's not as high as, for example, countries like Israel. So if you look at that, you would find out that actually the declining population itself is a problem, but it's not that a problem. What is very important is to increase the people, the talent in one country that has a higher value, has ability of creating higher value in economy. So I think that's much more important than just simply increasing the pie. Now, once you get that structure right, do you want more population? Yes. But I think the more important question is how do you make a labor efficient? And how do you make a labor strong enough that it can create value to the economy? So that's my point.
Okay, this is just my personal opinion, and this might be a little bit off topic, but then talking from a different perspective, I believe youth youth in general, especially in Japan, they tend to be free. And like, as I mentioned before, they focus more on work-life balance and they focus on life. So on a personal opinion, making, and youths don't like to be forced. I really feel that's a trend. So like they like to be free, they don't like to be forced. Creating an environment or a situation, of course, by, there has to be like an infrastructure set up, but then like creating an environment where youth by themselves understand or like, feel like, increasing the population or creating an environment where, it's more collaborative or it's more community focused. Population is going to increase. This decreasing population there will be a stop to the decreasing population. So, there is no answer to it, but just a personal opinion on that note.
I feel a bit pessimistic. I often visit. I'm currently living in Tokyo, but for my culture projects, I often go to, other cities, but I see, for example, budget setting of the local government is that people's mindset is still based on that the population is, stable, even though it will decrease, drastically. Why I'm saying it that there are so many, like for example, public infrastructure, for example, I don't know, water, and also sometimes electricity. Well, this public infrastructure is very important, and we have to very secure that for many people. But in the end, there are so many cities or even villages, towns, which loses, 50% of the population. And how to preserve these areas? Nobody knows the answer. And even I don't know, I have no answer as well. So, we have to, of course, as Soichiro says, population is very, population is not always the, essential factor of deciding the economic development. But at the same time, we have to change the mindset. Everyone has to change the mindset. Our population is going to be, 60% in 30 years, for example. We have to face the reality. And after that, we have to we need to take action after that. So I don't think the society is still catching up with this reality. This is my personal opinion.
Okay, based on what everybody was saying, I agree with Chiba-san that economic growth doesn't necessarily connect with the population growth, but at the same time, as Yuki-san said, it is I think a fact that, me personally, I'm 24 years at this moment. So in, 20 or 30 years, I'm going to be, in the main core of labor force. And that is the timing that I'm going to be facing the decrease of population, I believe. And I feel like, as Yuki-san said, it's very important to think about it's very important to make sure that population is not going to drastically decrease as much as possible from the perspective of public policy, that kind of context, but as well as we do really have to think about what's going to be the outcome of decreased populations. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of changes, but also, as I said before, I'm pretty optimistic. So increased development of artificial intelligence technologies, I think we will be able to, and we kind of have to cover the stuff that will be missing out because of the less population.
You can debate this point forever. It depends a little bit on what you're optimizing for, right? Now, Japan, as we learned, average age is 50. Right? When people come from Taipei or from Shanghai or from Hong Kong and you land at Narita or at Haneda Airport, they will say, oh my God, the electric walkways, they are so slow, right? Compared to Hong Kong, everything is so fast, right? And well, actually 8 years ago, there was a public decree that the speed of all public walkways had to be cut by 20%, which is correct public policy. Because if 1 in 4 of your population is over the age of 70, these things become dangerous machines, right? Now, of course, in America, they don't have that problem because none of the public walkways ever work anyways, right? But in all seriousness, Japan is a laboratory. Good, bad, we can debate, right? The quality of life, the productivity per person. I'm a member of one of the government advisory committees on the pension system. And there's all this wonderful debate, and all of us here in finance, we appreciate it. Oh, the discount rate, if only it goes from 7.9 to 8.3, we could do X, Y, Z. It's like, come on. The only way that you can assure that there is a stable pension system is to make sure our children earn twice as much as we do. That's the way you'll have a stable pension system. Navigating shared futures is one of the slogans of the Asia Society. I think, with your leadership, Chiba-san, it would be fantastic, to integrate a little bit more, perhaps the activities of the, Youth 7, Youth 20, with the Asia 21 leadership team there. We are working to find solutions. Nobody knows the answer, but we all do know that we will have to create the answer. And it's the young generation that's going to have to do it. Let's make sure that their ideas are twice as good as ours. Thank you very, very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and 本当にありがとう. Thank you.